Friends, have we got a show for you today? Coming up, we're going to be talking about 35mm cameras and instant film and how you get started and all that instant film coming up right now. I guess there's actually quite a bit to talk about when we get into this kind of thing, but the reality is I just wanted to sit down and give you guys a quick overview of how some of this stuff kind of comes together. Many times people ask me if I should use this camera or that camera or something like that. And I'd like to kind of go ahead and give you the overview of what I think about when people ask me that question. The first and very most important thing is, if you're going to get started in photography, it's a great time to just look around and find out what's there for you. Often, you don't need to buy something really expensive, meaning you don't need to go out and buy a new camera. Most of the times, you've got a cell phone around that's a great way to get started. And people completely overlook the idea of photography on your cell phone, especially when you're getting into it. I think this is because it's something you already have, and maybe you think it's something that you need. But the reality is, your cell phone is a great way to learn composition and things in photos that look interesting and unique, and try to develop a style or something that stands out before you start investing in a system. Also, there are many different constraints to a cell phone that will be very helpful for you in your growth process. Number one, it could be the camera, the resolution, the image quality. You have to work around all of those things in order to create the types of images that you would like. Although different, a film camera or an instant camera or a digital camera and your cell phone, those are really just form factors and mediums. Everything else about photography is very similar. And other than a few loose rules about how to go about making a picture that you throw away later once you figure out how to make a picture, there are not really many differences between them. So with that being the case, let's get started. I want you to kind of come over here and look at some of the things I've got. This is the number one question I get all the time. Maybe this will pop into focus real quick, is should I get the Fujifilm Mini Evo? I really like the Mini Evo quite a bit. It's a great little camera, but the reality is I don't think it's a great beginner camera. And that's not because it isn't fun. It's because it's a hybrid camera. And it is a lot of fun. And it does a lot of things. But the one thing you would like for it to do well, take digital photographs, it doesn't do that very well. I've made several different videos on this. And in my opinion, the sensor, although low resolution as far as megapixels, which doesn't necessarily bother me, has a very low dynamic range. For example, the film that is used in here, the credit card size Instax Mini Film, a film which I absolutely love and use all the time at weddings. I even use this at weddings, has the ability to show more color, range, and contrast than the sensor that the camera is built with, which means that you're leaving performance on the table because the sensor in the camera, well, doesn't really take the same kind of photograph that you would expect. If you were to take two separate photographs, one with your camera and then one with your cell phone, you would find that the cell phone will produce an image which is better, which is much higher dynamic range, which means more shadow detail and highlight detail saved. And then that print that this camera can then print from your cell phone will print a more pleasing image. In general, there are several reasons why you would get this camera. As a beginner camera, I just think that, sure, it'd be great. It's $200. It's a lot of fun. But if you're really trying to learn photography, there are better beginner cameras to learn photography on. And if you were going to learn photography, I might suggest this camera as a beginner if you were committed to learning on your phone and using this camera as you develop techniques on your phone. If that doesn't make sense, maybe it will after we talk about some other things. Now, I love this camera, just to let you know. I think its ease of use is great. I enjoy it. I do wish that they had improved some things of it, but it leaves me hopeful for another camera, a next generation, so to speak. With that being the case, I want to talk about one other thing, which is film. People so often forget film. Now, this is the venerable Olympus OM4T. This is my holy grail camera. I absolutely love this camera. I've got a ProMaster zoom on it, which is 24 to 105, I believe. Doesn't necessarily, 24 to 200, 28 to 200, yeah. And it's an f3.5 to 5.6 lens, or a little bit somewhere around there. And it zooms all the way up to that 200 millimeter, goes down to f22. This is a great all-around lens for this particular package. When it comes to the digital aspect of what the OM4T does well, it does some really interesting multi-spot metering, which is very helpful in a wedding or a professional situation, especially before cameras did a lot of metering for you. And there are several different modes on here, but I just absolutely love using that multi-spot metering when I'm out there. It just gives me the best of both worlds. Excellent exposure because of the exposure computer built into it, as well as I'm using film. But there are some big differences, and that's really what we're talking about today when it comes down to film versus digital versus a hybrid digital. So this takes what you would expect to be film, little rolls of film, as you can see right there. And I like a couple different brands. Well, I like Portra 160, and I think Pro Image 100 is really good. If you guys haven't seen that Pro Image 100, you'll enjoy it. And the thing about these different mediums is that when we're talking about getting into photography, the 35 millimeter camera is a complete chemical process. There is nothing digital to it, no matter which camera you get into. I've got the Canon EF right here, this gorgeous black beauty. You can find these brass cameras, solid brass, right? Painted cameras at flea markets for around $100, and they work like a champ. The OM4, by comparison, if you get a good deal on it, it's around $400 or $500. Pick up a 50 millimeter lens, which will come with most of them, and you'll be off and running making pictures using the good old-fashioned Sunny 16 rule, or some of those more advanced battery-operated features, such as the exposure computer in the OM4, or even some of the matched needle that's in the Olympus or in that Canon EF, the Black Beauty. In any event, that's about as far as digital imaging that those film cameras get, which are nothing more than just exposure calculator tools. So that means that everything else about the camera is really left to your brain. When we're talking about something like the Mini Evo, we're talking about film right here. And I thought I had a little picture around. I guess I don't. That film is credit card size, and it develops instantly, and I think it's wonderful. It looks great. You get to see immediate feedback, and there really isn't anything more magical than seeing a picture develop in front of your eyes, which is cool. Now, one thing that the Mini Evo gets right in this regard is that you can print whichever picture you want just by looking through the images and choosing which one you want to print. Remember, this is actually a digital camera with a little 5 megapixel sensor built into it. And when you look at the images that are on the camera, it's as simple as just scrolling through them and choosing which one you want to print and then printing it. It makes it pretty simple. In fact, I'll give you guys a pretty quick little walk around. Here's the camera right there. There's the front. We have a shutter button on the front, a selfie mirror as well. We've got a flash LED with self timer. That's the little red part right there. Our on and off is right here. This zoom ring right here isn't really a zoom ring. It allows you to control different settings on the camera, which is pretty cool. On the top, you're going to see a print lever, which is kind of neat. I'm going to go back real quick so that we can, when you pull that lever, it will make a print if you're on the print mode. But we've also got some buttons here that allow us to choose different settings as hot shoe, or actually a cold shoe right there, which is really nice, so that you can attach an accessory to it. On the back, you see that really nice screen. Well, actually, it's nice that we have a screen. It's pretty dim outside, and it's not really that great of a screen, but it's there. And then, of course, we see our buttons, and then we have our film eject. On the bottom is where we have our SD card, and that's a quick walk around of the camera. Works great in this respect that you can print only the pictures that you want, so you can always throw away the ones that are no good. But at the same time, there's a bit of magic that's lost in that process as well. I remember when I started photographing back in the day, and on cameras like, do I have my old T70 down there? No, I don't have my T70 down there, but actually I do. I've got my old T70 right here. So I got this camera from a buddy of mine just after high school, and I don't have a lens on it, so I covered it up. But this is a completely manual, but with some program automatic features built into it. And I remember taking all kinds of photos on this camera and having a little logbook, much like this little field notes guide right here, that I would write things down in, right? and my settings and stuff, and catalog my photos as I was on my photo journey learning how to make pictures. Well, a part of that journey is the actual development process. And let's go ahead and kind of look at that. The development process includes all of the stuff that you see right here. It includes your film, right? And then it includes a tank. You got to get your film inside that tank. You have to do this in the darkroom, by the way, or a dark bag, right? And then you've got to get your film onto these reels. And then you've got to put some developer in there so that you can go ahead and get your film in here, developer, and then start the whole development process. When you're all said and done, you got to squeegee your film, hang it out to dry, and then find some way to get those negatives onto your computer. Now, that's usually done through the use of a scanner, but not a regular scanner like Documents, a film scanner. That entire process has always amazed me. I find it ingenious and exciting. I enjoy doing those kinds of things. So going out and hanging out with my trusty old Olympus OM4 and this beautiful ProMaster zoom, or the 50 millimeter or 28 millimeter f2 that I've got for this camera system as well, is just an absolute joy to get out there and make some images. When you're done, you have to develop those images. Now, you can choose to send off your stuff to something like thedarkroom.com, or you can send your film to the Find, F-I-N-D, filmisnotdeadlab.com. Great places, by the way. But I find it just as exciting to go ahead and develop the film myself. Generally, when I photograph weddings using film, I will send my film to an online processor. If it's color film. If it's black and white, I'll develop it myself. I do it with color for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to ensure a type of quality, a lab quality that I can get. And number two, I want really high quality scans that I don't have the ability to do even with my nice scanner. I want a Frontier or a Noritsu drum scanner. Each one of those rolls can be up to $35 to develop and scan, not including sending your negatives back to you for archive or destroying them for free. So each roll of film around 35 bucks. That's like $1 a shot, plus whatever you're going to charge for it. I generally charge $100 per roll, and I don't do any editing to the film, right? And what I consider a roll is 20 to 24 deliverable exposures per roll of film. So it's about, $2.50 is what I'm charging. There's not really a lot of money to be made there, but it's a lot of fun. Now, you can charge more for weddings. Film for me is as an add-on, so they have the regular photography, and then a roll of film is extra, stuff like that. Moving on to it, it's actually quite a bit easier to develop film than what you might think. The Film Photography Project has a film development kit for 20 bucks, black and white, and I think the color is around $25 or $30. And yeah, for 30 bucks, you can develop the film in your house using a dark bag. You don't even need a dark room. The first couple of rolls of film are going to be kind of difficult. I've got videos on how to develop film, from the process of getting the film out of the cartridge, getting your leader onto the rolls, the film leader, the lead of the film onto these rolls, and then the actual development process. It's easy and a lot of fun. If you're developing black and white film, it gets even more fun because you can develop black and white film with coffee. Now, there are different things you have to consider when you're doing that, but check it out online if it's something that you're going to get into. When people ask me if they should get this particular camera and have that for their photography, for their learning camera, I have to say, again, like at the very beginning, maybe it's not usually my best choice. I would suggest a film camera and learning that process from the get-go. There's an anticipation that happens when you're waiting for your film to come back and you're thinking about your settings, and it's going to slow you down quite a bit. If for some reason you did want to learn film and you were really insistent about a camera like this, here's another reason I would suggest against this camera as a beginning camera for learning photography. And that is because this is simply a beautiful point and shoot camera. It is a very good to excellent hybrid camera. It is a good instant camera for instant film. but it is only a passable digital camera. Your cell phone takes way better photos than this. When you put all those things together for the use case that this is, it's great. Print what you want, have a good time, go out, have a party, add some interesting effects. And if you already know about photography, you can use a little bit of the exposure compensation to get some really cool things. But generally speaking, in your hands of someone that wants to learn photography, you have no way of learning anything about ISO, aperture, or shutter speed with this camera because it doesn't do those things. My suggestion would be something like a T100 or a Sony A6000, but more importantly, something used, even an Olympus Pen F, a used Pen F. You'd love to use one of those. It's a beautiful camera. An X100F, something that doesn't cost too much money, that comes with a lens and can get you out there. You do not need to spend a lot of money on photography to get started or even to stay in the art form. If you were going to go a little bit further, I would suggest the X100 series, mainly because of the beautiful dials that Fujifilm has on all of their cameras. I guess not all, but most of them. They're really great, and they help you use the camera and learn the exposure triangle because it puts, well, these old film knobs, which actually did something mechanical here, and it assigns a digital function to them so that it feels like you're using that mechanical process. So it just gets you more involved. And because they are dials rather than wheels or settings, you don't have to do any menu diving to get into them, and you can very easily access them. So even that makes it easier to look at the camera, see your settings, change them, and the camera doesn't even have to be on. So those are a couple of things that make it really interesting. But the reality is, I would suggest make it a day. Go out, go thrifting, find a film camera, right? You might want to know how to tell if your film camera is okay. And there are a couple of ways to do that. Number one, some cameras like this have a battery to control exposure of the shutter at any exposure higher than 1/60th of a second. So if you don't have a battery in your camera and you want to make sure that it works, put the shutter speed on 1/60th, set your aperture to whatever you want, and then take your picture. Camera's on the on position, cock it, let it go. There you are. Now, this has to have batteries in it, so it will continue more. It would go at a different rate, but 1/60th of a second is pretty much where you're going to go and determine whether or not a camera is going to be at least mechanically functional. Here's something else. A lot of times, people will, at the thrift shops and things like that, have the camera pre-cocked. It's been loaded and cocked so that the minute that you turn it on, all you'd have to do is press the button. But sometimes you don't know that when you're getting into photography, so you have no idea. So you might not think that the camera's working correctly. You might try to push the button, and it might not work. Well, there could have been something on the bottom, like an override that's been pressed to make sure that you didn't accidentally rewind the film while the camera was cocked, right? And then have an accidental double exposure. So if the camera is halfway through a cocked position or halfway through its cycle from someone else picking it up and messing with it and you don't know, check the little buttons down on the bottom of the camera. If the camera's got an on button, make sure that it's ready. If it doesn't, if it's completely mechanical, attempt to cock it. Don't force it. If it doesn't go, attempt to put the shutter button down. If that doesn't go, look around the bottom and find out if there's these little buttons. If there are, press them. Put them in and you'll find, see? Now, good. Now this camera will go too. So none of those things are going to hurt the camera, but it will help you ensure that your camera is going to operate appropriately. And finally, if there's any questions that you have, just do a quick Google search to get that going. You might ask me why I did not do that with this camera. This camera is also 1/60th of a second, but I've got film in here, so I'm not going to just start shooting all of that stuff and using it up. I hope that you've been able to see that the idea about photography really doesn't matter which way you want to go with it. The real idea is what feels best. In any event, it's going to be the same principles that apply, but learning the most about your photography and as you're getting into photography, I think would be better suited on a camera. You put some good old-fashioned film in and then you take on a walk. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you found this video useful or helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Keep it classy down there in those comments. And if any of this was helpful, please don't forget to use those Amazon links to get your film or a computer or whatever, or even send me a cup of coffee. All of that stuff really helps, and I appreciate it quite a bit. Guys, I want to thank you so much for watching and let you know that I'll catch you all on the flip side. I'm going to send us out to a little bit of Stay Right There. I hope you enjoy. Bye for now. Spent so many nights living out at sea that my heart is gone vacant. Everybody who was close to me all stayed on dry land. So now I'm driving back on Interstate West. I just gotta feel something. Not gonna wait till the morning, because something's gonna change my mind. I don't wanna change my mind.